welcome to Bots and Beyond, your weekly dose of all things automation, mixing up end user, vendor and consultant experience to create your go-to podcast for bot-related insights. I am your host, Wayne Butterfield.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Bots and Beyond. I can't believe it's episode 10 already, and another amazing episode lined up today with Alex Davies over at RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. Alex has been a long-time client of ISG and has really pioneered in their use of RPA, and I can't wait to get into the detail with Alex. But before we kind of open up to the questions, it'd be fantastic for you to introduce yourself. So, as is the norm, if you can introduce your who, what, and why intro, that would be brilliant, Alex.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Wayne. Appreciate the invitation to join the podcast series. So you said my name is Alex Davies, program manager at RBC. I've been working there for about 7 years, and I do front office focused change roles, not just the robotics, but obviously that's what we're going to talk about here today. And in terms of, very briefly, I guess the sort of 20 seconds, what and the why, we're going to talk about the use of RPA in front office metro environments on the trading floor. The why really for me is about having a tool that's slightly orthogonal to a lot of the other technologies that we deploy on the trading floor, and therefore being able to pick up some of the attractive use cases, and also with an interesting sort of cost-benefit trade-off. Being in the revenue-generating areas just gives you an extra angle in terms of your payback for these sorts of programs.
And what about, you mentioned already that there is, you deal with automation, but you also deal with a few other things. I mean, tell me a bit about your background with automation. Kind of when did you get involved? How involved have you been, and kind of what progress have you been making over that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So briefly, I was a scientist in a previous life, but moving past that, I went through management consultancy and into a number of roles within financial services, within large investment banks. Most of that has been, as I say, various change roles within the larger operating model, not just front office focused over my career, but bringing automation to bear across middle and back office as well. Like all of the large service industries, financial services has got quite a complicated web of processes. So it's a mix of technologies and people, all on a sort of, follow the sun, pan global model. So really my interest in automation has been, given an almost infinite set of choices, right? There are endless places where you can bring automation to bear. The interesting question to me is where you choose to apply automation, what it is that you're looking for in as recompense for that work, and what tool should you employ where. So I guess the final observation, the comment I'd sort of give is if you look at a front office environment in a capital markets franchise, you're talking about a heavily automated area where significant portions of the operating model are highly customized and are ultra low latency, way beyond the point of human capability already. Those are not the kind of areas that you're going to look to use RPA. They're not the kind of places where you're going to look to apply robotics. But that said, we still have, a decent number of people in the front office, highly remunerated, highly capable metro resource. And if you look carefully enough, you will still find some interesting use cases where you can bring robotics to bear, you can bring RPA to bear, and you can free up their time in pursuit of other opportunities. So it's really that kind of angle of how we intelligently use automation to improve what is already, in many respects, a highly automated and highly customized environment.
Brilliant. I have so many questions now. I always find you learn something new. And I didn't know you used to be a scientist. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit later because I want to know a little bit more about that, how you go from scientist to automation guru. Really interesting. You did speak about, and you've mentioned it a few times, kind of front office. I would say, a lot of organizations, a lot of the big, banking, financial institutions have certainly looked in the back office, really keen to dig into that front office. So what was it that you were doing there? It feels like you've pushed boundaries. Talk to me a little bit more about what and why front office for RBC.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's really is the sort of the key in a way to what we've been doing the last few years. So I started to get a look at RPA back in sort of 2015, and I got a demo. It was an invoice processing demo. It was a pretty terrible demo, but the power of the tool and the applicability of it was obvious. It kind of shone a light on it. And as you say, at the time, the automation play was primarily back office, and it was industries away from financial services, at least initially, right? And obviously it's taken off massively in the years since. But the basic conjecture, and I think it's a sound one, don't get me wrong, this is where most of the RPA work will happen, that the conjecture is that in back office you're going to find reasonably well-typed, mature processes that have a manual element for whatever reason, right? And you can swap in robots to perform that task more quickly and efficiently and cheaply than any, corresponding offshore or outsourced model or whatever the case may be. So it's a perfectly compelling business case, and it is the dominant case for robotics. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. When I looked at the tool, in the way I kind of thought, well, it's almost a bit selfish to just keep it in the back office. What do you have in the front office, and why might we be able to use it there? The clever bit of RPA, also one of the several clever bits, is that it's not trying to be automation by classic IT application building means. It's simply seeking to replicate human activity at the desktop, right? And if you go to a trading floor, you will find humans performing tasks at their desktop. So that at least suggests that there must be some task that they're performing. And that is indeed the case. And there's a couple of reasons why that might be. After 2008, a lot of regulation, a lot of focus on front office activity in cap markets. Some of the processes that you might have sent to your back office actually have got to stay. They have to stay in the front office. And another reason why you might get some processes lasting longer is, so if you can't move it to the back office, that's one. And the other one is the classic automation route. As you know, there are some tasks that are just a little bit harder to automate for whatever reason. It might be the type of data source. It might be the requirement to interact via a UI, right, where an API is not available. So all of these things added up to the idea that, there might be some stuff in the front office, not huge amounts, but enough. And that's what really got us thinking that we could use robotics in the front office. And the use cases that we found have been really quite consistent with that model. We found places where, as I say, very, very highly skilled resource are doing low value activities, and those are the ones that we target, whether it's booking trades or performing allocations or writing client notes, whatever it may be. Anything that the robot can do for them and then free them up is what we're kind of looking for. So that's the kind of background of where it originally came from, and the sort of the genesis of the idea over time.
Fantastic. That's really insightful. I guess it's thinking about it's tasks, isn't it, rather than end-to-end kind of processes. It's almost like there are a number of different activities that people in the office are completing. It might not necessarily be an end-to-end process. It might not necessarily be high volume transactional, again, like you might see in the back office, but actually because it's completed by somebody, extremely well paid, you still get a great ROI on that. And I think we should probably dig into that a little bit more shortly. But I want to touch on the point that, if you think about where your bots are and where they're supported, and you spoke about following the sun. I mean, you've got bots in trading floors of New York, London, Shanghai, right?
Yes, absolutely. We originally went live in London, and we went live in New York fairly shortly after that. So we now have, I guess it's fair to say, it's like all of these, where do the robots sit? Often, they're sitting out in the ether somewhere, right? But in terms of the user base and the trading desk that they're working for, yeah, they're working 24/7. So they start in Sydney, and they're going to end, when the Toronto trading day finishes. So in a way, I guess it's a truism, because that's what the business does. That's the need that we have to meet, and we do the same thing. You obviously need a significant degree of robustness as if you're going to do that. But again, as the primary major RPA tools do offer that. If you build them carefully, if you build in the appropriate handling, then there is no reason why they cannot run for significant periods of time and perform a lot of work across multiple time zones. And we, as I say, we've certainly proven that model. And that's a more of a niche case, if you like. But we certainly have taken on some tasks where it's unseasonable hours, right? So if you can do a task at 4 a.m. for a trading desk, so they don't have to, right? Then there's an added kind of soft benefit there, if you like. And so we certainly have some out of hours processes where we have that capability.
Fantastic. Really, really insightful. I love the idea of when I think of trading floors, I kind of think of Wolf of Wall Street, which I guess brings kind of like, surely there must be an impact on the trading floor as a result of COVID, just thinking about it. You kind of think of all these people and, slips of paper in their hands, shouting, all these electronic screens everywhere, but it's full of people, right? It's bustling. I mean, how's COVID actually disrupted, I guess, the front office of RBC and the trading floors? I mean, what's happened there actually?
So I'm sorry to disappoint, but there is an RBC trading floor, of course. There are several across the globe. They couldn't be less different in tone and behaviour from Wolf of Wall Street. But where you are correct is, that you're going to get a large expanse with lots of people. It's a hive of activity, and absolutely. So that description is valid. And what has COVID done to that? Well, as you know, COVID, at least in the initial lockdown and probably in the most recent one, has essentially locked down and emptied those floors, right, to a really major degree. And if you look at, I think I'll speak sort of, this is pan-industry. This isn't just RBC. But what you've had is a huge reduction in the number of people who are able to stay on site. So it's not completely zero, but it's staggeringly reduced. You've got people who've gone to DR sites, disaster recovery, and you've got probably the large bulk who've been working from home. So the trading floor has been dissipated, right? And that's not something you could have contemplated before COVID. The robots, very pleasingly, were both very busy because it was a period of very high market volatility, and their action was pretty much seamless. There was pretty much no disruption to their performance and to their activities. And if you cast your mind forward for what's going to happen over time, clearly we're expecting over time people to return to the office, but I think everybody anticipates that there will probably be more remote working. There have certainly been some new processes that have been established to handle and manage the compliance and regulatory implications of this new model. And I think there's almost certainly going to be more work for the robots because they're the only people who do not need to be marched off the floor. So they've quietly and consistently carried on their work through this entire period.
That's great, and I guess it echoes something that I've been saying for a while, really. Really since COVID kind of hit, that you need to think about the role of your silicon workers, your digital workers and your human workers. And I think episode 2 was around when business continuity planners suddenly became gods overnight because it was their plans that were being dusted off. And as organizations realized what the impacts of a global pandemic were, and then I guess they quickly realized that their plans didn't work because it's great to have resilience with different locations, but you move your London closes down, so you move your operations to Sydney. Well, Sydney's closed down, so you move it to Shanghai. Well, Shanghai's closed down. And you're right, having those digital workers, which are very resilient, as far as we're aware, are not affected by COVID, nor should they ever be. You can absolutely see, and it's great. It's great to hear of that resilience, firsthand. So that's really good. I'm still a little in the dark about ROI for you guys. So if I think about traditional business cases, it's generally always about let's say hours back to the business. It's calculated usually through volume times handle time, and more often than not, it's kind of your lower paid workers who you are automating the tasks of. You are very different here. How do you go about proving value back to the business? I'd be really interested in digging into that, if that's okay, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm happy to chat about it. And I think it's been a more complicated piece for the entire industry, right, than sometimes people assume. I think if you thought, if you listen to someone like Leslie Wilcox, he'll talk about the intensification of work and talk about the changes that automation brings to the workplace and how work gets done. It's a more thorny problem, right, than you might initially assume. So you are right that the big play in middle and back office of automation is a cost saving, cost reduction, right? You're going to seek to replace human FTE with robot FTE, and it's going to be a lower run rate, and you're going to use your metrics and your work done to prove that out. We still generate metrics, and it's an important component of I guess, our responsibility to our stakeholders to prove, but it's more proving that the robots have utility and have value and are being used, right? It's more about proving out whether we undertook our opportunity selection appropriately. It's proving out whether the stakeholders who requested the robots are using them. So we do the metrics, and that's very important. That's still a bedrock. But you're absolutely right that what we've given away when we move to the front office is we've really given away any expectation of what people euphemistically call FTE liberation, right? There is not a single person on the trading floor whose job can be taken away by a robot. The processes are not that well typed. It's just out of the question, right? That's not what we employ those people for. It would be naive to think otherwise. So even though as you say, they're generally very highly remunerated, there's a reason for that, and you're not going to swap them out for an RPA robot. So we give that up, and so then the key question is, well, what do we get? What do we get instead? And we get a couple of levers which I think are highly valuable, and support our program. So the first lever that we have available that other people don't have is revenue uplift or revenue protection, right? So if you can automate a task that is gating a business opportunity, right? So let's say, whatever it may be, some significantly complicated trade with a big manual overhead, and we're going to put the phone down if we can't do the business at a certain size because it's just not economic for us. The robot might be able to make that economic, right? We might be able to protect some client revenues. Our clients may have a certain way of conducting their business. It might not fit in with our existing stack. The robots, as you know, can be very cheap and efficient ways of bridging an automation gap, and we've certainly done some of that. So those revenue opportunities are big. It can also be indirect. If I can save a director on the sales desk 3 or 4 hours of their time, I can reasonably expect them to spend that time on revenue accretive opportunities. They can be talking to their clients. They can be doing new business. If I've taken away some low-value task, right? So that indirect effect can be quite important, and sometimes it can be concentrated at peak times. So if you're looking at, I don't know, it might be a month end. It might be a month end when you really want to be on the phone to your clients. You've also got tons of activity, tons of manual tasks to perform. So those things factor into it as well. And then the last one, which is which is not an ROI piece, but is important in the front office. I think it's important everywhere, but we've got a particular angle, is the soft benefits. I'll give you one anecdote on this, if I may. We have robots in use in the investment bank. They are taking away some low value tasks, some low value activity from the junior rank. That has a significant soft benefit. Anecdotally, the head of the business tells me that he has lost people in the past because they've got sick and tired of performing those mundane tasks, and they leave RBC just at the point where they've become highly trained, highly competent, have their own business relationships, and are very valuable to us. But that soft benefit, very hard to measure, right? So I'm not going to claim it can feed easily into an ROI number, but again, is available to us because of the environment that we're working in, right? Where, again, that can be a significant enough element that allows a business head to say, I'm going to fund this work, and I'm going to stand behind the business uplift that I receive from the robots. So let me just, I'll pause there, Wayne. There's lots of angles on this one, but does that sort of give you a sort of high level overview of that?
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I would definitely say so. Listening to you there, it feels like a very, mature way of approaching robotics, different to a lot of organizations where they're thinking about cost out, but just, I guess, knowing that you're doing the right thing, even if it's sometimes difficult to completely quantify, but you're doing the right thing. I think that's a really interesting and useful way of thinking about robotics, especially in that kind of front office where it's very difficult to, take, the exact transactions and times and build business cases in traditional ways. So, I think it's a really grown up, way of approaching, ROI. And, it's not going to work for everybody, of course. But I think it's certainly something that I'm going to take away and highlight as an example to others that it is possible, and you don't have to manage the value you create via spreadsheets. You can just take a bit more of a leap of faith and just know that you're doing the right thing, and gain the backing of the business who also believe you are doing the right thing. So really, really interesting. Conscious of time, actually, and I did want to double check and see where you thought you would be going next. So obviously looked at RPA, we've looked at trading floors. I presume there's that it's more than just the trading floors where you've deployed. But have you got any things that you are keen to talk about where you're going next, or technology types or anything like that? What's next for RBC?
Yes, good question. So briefly, I think there's a couple of angles. The first one, and it's a nice one actually, is more of the same. So we within the next couple of months, we'll put a couple of new business lines live with certain processes. I guess the point there is we're not keen on innovation for innovation's sake. We've worked hard to develop a proposition. It's still valuable. We still think there's benefit there. So we will be doing more of the same. So that's the first thing. Second thing, maybe a little bit slower than other people have done, right? Because we've been very happy with our dumb deterministic robots. I think we will start to look at some additional technologies in support of certain use cases. There is some unstructured data, some contract data that I think we want to get a hold of to drive robotic processes, and that's going to need maybe a machine learning solution. So I think we're going to look at maybe some integration there. I think the time is kind of right for that. I like the price point of how those technologies have developed. And then I guess the last thing is what we'd already talked about, which is, I'm interested in post-vaccine, new world of work, which I think will emerge from all of this. What are the opportunities that have arisen as a consequence of the disruption and the new model that we go towards? So I think those are the three strands for us, really.
Brilliant. Alex, absolute pleasure having you on this week. Really appreciate your time. Some amazing insights there. Always good to hear how organizations are approaching the use of RPA. And he's definitely got some real nuggets of information there that I'm sure the audience will find really insightful. So thank you for your time, much appreciated. And that will bring us to the end of this week's Bots and Beyond. I'll speak to you all next week.
Thanks for listening to ISG Automation's Bots and Beyond podcast, your weekly dose of all things automation. See you next week for more news and views on RPA, intelligent automation, and AI.